I believe that Ohio State is one of the best teams in America and that they are going to compete for the Big Ten championship and that they are going to compete for the national championship. And at the same time, I believe that Oregon, well, exposed Ohio State on Saturday and some of the weaknesses that they have. So what I want to do in today's video is talk about those weaknesses, discuss the things that Oregon exposed that the Buckeyes need to fix. Oregon opened some wounds. They opened weak spots, and they gave Ohio State all they had on Saturday night, and they came away with the 32-31 win, where it was a margin of inches all around. Dylan Gabriel was just a little bit better than Will Howard. Jordan James was a little bit better than Travion Henderson. Oregon in the trenches was better by a margin of inches, if not centimeters, millimeters. Oregon's receivers leveled up with Ohio State's, and you can go on and on and on. In game management, Oregon was better by a margin of inches. There are so many things to talk about, and I didn't get to all of them in detail in my 47-minute reaction and analysis video because I had to talk about Oregon and Ohio State. And now, about a day or two after making that, I wanted to circle back and discuss things specifically from the Ohio State angle. I wanted to talk about a few things that Ohio State can do better. There's going to be something I'm going to discuss that is a praise for Ohio State. They overachieved in an area that I did not think they were elite in. Hint, hint, that's the passing offense. Will Howard looked like one of the nation's best quarterbacks, looked like a Heisman caliber quarterback against Oregon. And then, of course, Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith, they did a good job. Smith once again had another game where he was in the triple digits in receiving yards, had some pretty incredible catches, but the defense got gashed over and over and over again. And the rushing offense, outside of 2 long runs from Henderson, was pretty inactive, and Ohio State only ran the ball about 7 times in the second half. So there's a lot to talk about that I didn't get into, and I want to dive deeper into today and really tear apart, piece apart, and give analysis on a variety of areas that Ohio State needs to do better in if they want to win the national championship, if they want to win the Big Ten, if they want to beat Penn State in a few weeks, because Penn State in power ratings is right up there with Oregon. Don't know how many of you knew that. It doesn't feel like many people know that, but they are. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about this. And before we do, of course, please like the video. Please share it around. Hit that subscribe button. Also click the notification bell as we are close, only a few hundred subscribers away from 20,000. And I will be doing a massive giveaway at 20,000 subscribers for multiple different people. So subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when that happens. And also so you can get notified when we release new content here on College Football with Sam. We pride ourselves as being the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube. And if you want to talk about college football 24/7, even talk about it with me, join our Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And also, comment your thoughts down below. Comment your takeaways from Ohio State versus Oregon and what you think about the Buckeyes now in comparison, in perhaps even some of you juxtaposition to what you thought of before this game kicked off and before the clock hit 0. And if you want to support the channel monetarily, check out the Patreon page or merchandise store. Again, the link for those is in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Same with the Discord server, but joining the Discord server is free, and liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the bell, commenting, all those things are free, and those are the best things you can do to support the channel and also to ensure that you get the best college football analysis. I think the first point that I wanted to get into was really the defense, because the defense is what shocked me here. Take a look at this. Jim Knowles allowed, or Oregon forced might be the more proper term, but Jim Knowles' defense allowed / Oregon's offense and Will Stein forced 496 total yards. They averaged 7.6 yards per play, 0.492 points per play. Oregon averaged 14.8 yards per completion, which I don't think Ohio State's secondary last season faced a passing offense that had this type of speed and depth at receiver and also that had the same veterancy at quarterback that Dillon Gabriel presented. But regardless, that number would have been unheard of in 2023 allowed from this secondary. And they allowed 32 total points. Could have allowed more points if not for a missed field goal and if not for Dillon Gabriel misreading the play on 4th and goal where Tez Johnson was obviously wide open. I saw that the minute it happened. Why Gabriel didn't see it? Well, has a bird's eye view. Just one of his few mistakes of that night. And yes, Oregon didn't score that. But the reason why it's important to talk about that hypothetical, especially here, is Oregon could have scored 40 points in this game. And then the conversation would be even worse. And on Buckeye social media, it would be even more toxic than it already is. Because it would be, let's see, in all of the big-time matchups, the top 5 matchups that Jim Knowles' defense has been engaged in, it would be Michigan, Georgia, Oregon. It would be, I think, the 4th game, the 4th top 5 game for Jim Knowles' defense, and the 3rd, if I'm reading this right off the top of my head, again, for teams that finished in the top 5. Notre Dame in 2022 was not top 5. Doesn't count. It was a nice top 25 win, not much else. 3 top 5 matchups where Jim Knowles' defense allows 40 or more points. Could have been. It's only been 2, and this defense I still think is better than the 2022 defense, but there are some things to work on when you look at this unit here and how much they allowed, to be honest. The only game against an ESPN FPI top 5 team where Jim Knowles' defense has excelled was last season against Penn State. And Penn State, for the type of team that they had last year, put together one of the most horrific game plans I have ever seen against that Ohio State defense. They completely abandoned the run when that was their strength, when that was Ohio State's weakness on defense, and they tried to have Aller pass it for around 40 times against one of the nation's best passing defenses. Why they did that? I guess it's a James Franklin and Mike Yurcich moment, but that's really the only game against a team that is viewed as uber dominant or near elite that a Jim Knowles defense has excelled against. And I think that part of the reason why this is because the scheme is vanilla and it needs change. It feels like every time Oregon snapped the ball, every play that they ran, the counterpunch from Jim Knowles and Ohio State was they were going to send at most 4 men forward. There was that one play on the 3rd and 9 where they sent, it looked to be 5, maybe 4 men forward. Only 2 actually came. The rest dropped back into zone. And the reason they did that is because, well, Dillon Gabriel's a short yard check down merchant. That's what he is. And they wanted to take that away. And Oregon was doing a pretty good job of moving down the field on them, even early in the game, using short yardage, because that's what they're good at. But what happened as a result of that play is they took away the check down, but they gave Dillon Gabriel all the time in the world to find Tez Johnson. It was actually Evan Stewart on that play deep who burned Denzel Burke. And Denzel Burke and Ohio State's corners rarely got safety help. The defense, to me, is just, it is not obsolete, but it's bordering on that because they're running exactly what they did last year. Very conservative, very bend but don't break. They want teams to go for it on 4th and goal against them and get the goal line stop. They don't want to force teams to, I mean, ideally they do, but they don't truly want badly teams to punt inside of their own 50. They want you to get some yards, get some first downs, settle for a field goal, make a mistake. It honestly reminds me a little bit of Iowa's style of defense. You can run on Ohio State if you present a balanced offense, and Oregon did, but they'll bow up in the red zone. And, you know, sometimes it worked. Other times, Oregon didn't even need to score in the red zone because they could just go over the top with their quarterback and receivers. But I think the scheme is vanilla. I think it needs change. There needs to be more rotation on the defensive line at linebacker. I mean, this defense is full of good players. It's deep. And Ohio State's defense is not the disaster that Michigan's is, for example, in terms of misusing personnel. But they have depth at D end. They have depth at D tackle. They have some depth at linebacker, some players, younger players at linebacker that have stepped up that I didn't exactly expect to. And they have Jermaine Matthews Jr. at corner. They have a All-American type player sitting behind the starting corners. There was little, if any, rotation. And this defense, as a result, got worn out. It got worn out by the fourth quarter. I was rewatching the highlight package of this game that was produced. I forget if it was I think it was by Fox or maybe, no, NBC, because the game was on NBC. No duh. But a lot of the highlight packages I watch are on Fox. But I watched the game in full, and I watched the highlight package. And early in the fourth quarter, it was evident that Ohio State's defense was tired. And I think that the 4th and goal, that stop was the last time Ohio State's defense was going to get a stop. And then after that, it was just whether Oregon was going to settle for a field goal or whether they were going to score a touchdown. Like, that was the last time that defense was going to get a stop. And then after that, they slowly but surely melted away because they were tired. Oregon was doing a good job of keeping them guessing, of keeping them on the field, keeping them honest, running trickery. Early on, the trickery was kind of inappropriate in a way where it just didn't work. The 2-point conversion, the weird formation on 3rd and long that was incomplete, resulted in a missed Atticus Sappington field goal. But as the game progressed, they made more calculated trick plays that paid off, like the halfback toss on 3rd and 6 that, well, Ohio State didn't see coming. And it worked to perfection, and Jordan James extended that drive, which led to the game-winning field goal for the Oregon Ducks. The D-line in particular was tired. Sawyer, Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, that defensive front barely rotated. Is it because outside of those 4 players there is a steep drop-off, or the staff is stubborn, or Ohio State was desperate because they weren't able to get a stop throughout the game, so they didn't want the potential of a drop-off to result in an Oregon touchdown? I don't know. And some of those reasons are logical reasons to keep your starters in. But the reality is that this all circles back to Will Stein and Oregon and Dan Lanning working Ohio State's defense and preventing them from doing really anything they wanted to do outside of that stop on 4th and goal. And then Atticus Sappington's missed field goal, that's more of a special teams thing than a defense thing, despite what the announcers always say. I hate that, by the way. Announcers always say, oh, well, Ohio State's defense or X person's defense, they hold, they get a stop. It's like, no, that was either the opponent's special teams unit messing up or your special teams unit succeeding. Wasn't the defense. And the defensive backs, by the way, they were annihilated. Those are the 2 positions that really failed, I think, the most defensively. The defensive line couldn't get any pressure. At the end of the day, they were tired. They weren't able to get the same penetration on Oregon's offensive line that Oregon's defensive line got on Ohio State's offensive line, even before Simmons tragically went down. And I mean, Oregon, again, they averaged nearly 15 yards per completion. Gabriel averaged 10 yards per pass attempt. Every time he threw the ball up, whether it was incomplete or not, on an average basis, Oregon earned a first down. That's not good. That is not good. That is something that must be fixed, whether it's with rotations, whether you change up the scheme. I don't know. And I don't think Denzel Burke is this horrid corner. Will Johnson, I watched him have a bad day against Washington. We've seen other defensive backs have bad days. This may be indeed a one-off, but I happen to think that a one-off is an extreme. Saying Burke is a horrible player is also an extreme. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And it wasn't just Burke that got torched. There were other receivers who were able to get behind Ohio State's DBs and other Ohio State defensive backs outside of Burke. Burke was the biggest eyesore, but this secondary as a whole was not amazing. Missed tackles, bad angles, some of that being that they were tired at the end of the game. The Dylan Gabriel zone read keeper, for example, Ohio State's defense looked demoralized. They looked tired. That touchdown was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Oregon's rushing attack ramped up in the fourth, and for basically the entire game, the receivers had their way on this defense. And as I said, the defense was broken in the fourth quarter. At that point, what Ohio State needed to do is they needed to make the superior chess moves. They needed to play the better strategy. They could no longer rely on their roster to win the game. They needed to make better game management decisions. They needed to make the perfect play calls, and they didn't. And that's why Ohio State fell short. But may I remind you, only by a point. They didn't get blown out. They didn't get humiliated in a defensive slugfest where the score is closer than the actual true margin of victory was, if that makes any sense. It was a 1-point loss to a team that's clearly in the top 4 on the road in a rowdy, loud, obnoxious, intimidating environment. I assume all of you have seen the photos of Ohio State fans plugging their ears, and even though NBC, I don't think, does a good job of showing you or communicating to you through the TV how loud stadiums are that they broadcast, that they cover, it was clear to me that even through their toned down volume that Outson Stadium was loud. Very clear to me. And the game was 4 time zones away. And also, again, like I said, a 1-point loss, and if Ohio State had not punted after making that 4th down stop, they go down and they extend the lead to 2 scores. And they probably win, and I am probably sitting here telling you right now that they're the best team in the country, or at least that they're number 2. However, championships are won in inches, typically, unless you have a GOAT caliber team. And there is no GOAT caliber team this season. There is not. I would not pick this Ohio State team to beat any of the national champions of the 4-team era. I wouldn't pick any team this year outside of maybe Texas, and even then I'd question it, to beat any of the national champions of the 4-team era. This is a very, very down year in college football. Very down year. And that is where I felt like Ohio State kind of lost the game. Is Will Howard got a good snap from Seth McLaughlin, and McLaughlin did very well for being on the road. I think it's now kind of clear that Milroe does not exactly snap the ball the best, given the transition that McLaughlin's made from Alabama going to Ohio State, or maybe there was something else going on there, but Alabama's had some low snaps this season. Ultimately, though, Will Howard, I think a little bit of it being the pressure and the road environment. He has not faced a road environment like that, by the way. McLaughlin actually has, having, been to Tiger Stadium, for example. Will Howard playing in the Big 12 hasn't been to these type of venues. Well, he fumbled the snap, and Ohio State had to punt, and all the momentum they got from that stop was pretty much immediately taken away. That's where the game was lost, I think, was right there. And also in the final 30 seconds, where if Ryan Day just run it up the middle, center, kick the field goal. If you miss it, then hire a dedicated special teams coach after this season. If you don't, well, then you come out with a win on the road in a game where, honestly, you got exposed in some areas, but you won. And that's the best thing. When you win, but you get exposed, so you have the unblemished record, your confidence may actually go up because you got challenged, but you overcame it, and you have things to fix. That's the best case scenario. Unfortunately for Ohio State, that's not what happened. But quickly, before we get out of here, I do want to say their passing offense is clearly elite. They were 28 of 35 for 326 yards, 11.6 yards per completion, and 2 touchdowns. And Will Howard at a 93.4 QBR. He had his best game of his career at Ohio State, maybe the best game of his entire career. And I would probably say the best game of his entire career. The throws that he made, on point, accurate. There were a few overthrows, a few underthrows, but only 7 incompletions. And he did a very good job, I think, of managing the game, of doing what he was supposed to do. and making some extra plays and going a little bit above and beyond. Of course, he took a sack on the 2-minute drill, and he ran and slid with no time left when he should have either quickly thrown it away to get another playoff or tried something different. But it is what it is, ultimately. He didn't have a perfect game, but he is not the reason why Ohio State lost. Neither were Emeka Egbuka. I'm not going to pin the OPI on Jeremiah Smith. No, he shouldn't have done that. Freshman mistake. That play will always be called as OPI because he literally shoved the DB to the turf. Can't do that. But I pin that more on the staff because he's a freshman, a true freshman, in an environment where he's never been to a game like that. As a player, he hasn't. He's going to, as a true freshman, in an environment like that, probably going to mess up. And again, run the football. Do not be passing to your receivers in that situation where it could be picked off, or you could get the OPI, or you could get holding for the tackles trying to protect your quarterback. Run the football, up the middle, center it, kick it. And I think the reason why maybe they didn't do that was a combination of it not working against Georgia in the Peach Bowl in a similar situation, and also the fact that I think the rushing offense is kind of a paper tiger. Judkins didn't do much. Henderson had 2 long runs, and outside of that, he didn't do a whole lot. There were multiple times where on 3rd and short, Ohio State surrendered to tackle for loss, and Oregon forced to stop. You take out Henderson's 53-yard run, and then you also take out the sack because I don't like those. I don't like that sacks are counted against rushing yards. But you do that whole equation, Ohio State only ran for 97 yards and 3 yards per carry exactly. That's not good enough. That's not going to win you games in the Big Ten. Big games in the Big Ten. That will not win you big-time games at the national level. And if it does, that's an exception to the rule, not the rule. It would be better for Ohio State to have an elite rushing offense rather than an elite passing offense. It would be much better for the current offensive situation at Ohio State to be the inverse of what it is right now in terms of winning national championships and winning the Big Ten. Maybe Ohio State would be in closer games. There wouldn't be some of the blowouts that they had. The game against Iowa may not go the way it did scoring-wise, but they would be in a much better position also if the defense played better, to win the Big Ten, to win the national championship, and to beat Oregon here. Ohio State wants to run the ball. Believe me, they tried their hardest to run the ball in the first half, and outside of some big plays, it didn't work all that much. That's why they deviated away from the run in the second half and only ran it 7 times, which I think was too extreme of a reaction, but it was understandable given that most of the time Ohio State ran the ball in the second half, Ohio State stopped it for a negative play or right at the line of scrimmage. It was just not an effective performance on the ground. And also a huge chunk of over 1/10 of Ohio State's rushing yards were from wide receiver end arounds because Egbuka had that one 10-plus carry. I know it's just one play, and maybe I'm digging into things too much here, but the rushing offense has to be better in big games. I documented this on Twitter and on my reaction and analysis to this game. Ohio State has not both had more total rushing yards and averaged more yards per carry against a top 5 team in FPI since they played Clemson in 2020. That's how long it's been since in a game against an opponent that finishes the season as a near elite to elite team that Ohio State has done a better job in total of running the football compared to their near elite opponent. And that's why in those games they have a losing record, because they can't control the games and they rely on their athletic talent rather than being able to dictate the pace and dictate the just dictate the game in total. That's all I have to say in today's video, though. And again, Ohio State can still win the Big Ten. They can still win the national championship. They could be the best team in college football, but they do have some things to fix if they want to solidify those achievements and maximize their chances at earning them. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Conwell OH also for being a Heisman member. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, Tyler Nye, and Chilton Cush for being All-American members. Thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus also for being all-conference members. And remember to check out my merchandise store, Patreon page, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Have a great day, everyone. Go Buckeyes.